Sorry, Kentucky fans, but Scott Drew is a Bear for life. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome, everyone, to a special live emergency edition of Locked On Baylor. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. And I'm sure this week your first, second, third, fourth, fifth listen, as all of this media circus of a coaching search has come to an end, on our end at least. Scott Drew announced today he will stay in Waco, has turned down the Kentucky Wildcats to continue his legacy with the Baylor Bears. And boy, what news this was. It has been a knockdown, drag out, sweated out kind of week, the likes of which we have not seen with Scott Drew in this Baylor basketball program ever. And finally, we get the answer today that Scott Drew is staying. And I went out and said it on Twitter. I'll stick with it here. I think it's the second biggest day in the history of Baylor men's basketball. April 5th, 2021, winning the national championship, number one. April 11th, 2024, Scott Drew turning down probably the biggest college basketball job in the sport to stay at Baylor and continue building with the Bears. This is just fantastic news, like incredible news. I was with a lot of you guys last night in terms of, like, I think I called it the danger zone. I mean, we had reached DEFCON 5. His family was on a private plane that is owned by a Kentucky booster, and we're out to see Lexington. That looked like the end. It looked like it was over. This morning, I was able to go into the flight tracker. I actually did have a friend tip me off on this, that Joe Kraft's plane was out to New York. Rick Pitino, Dan Hurley, who knows, but not Scott Drew. And I'm like, okay, that feels good. That sounds like they're moving on to other options. And not but an hour later or so, Scott Drew announces himself that he will be coming back to Baylor. And this is just a massive day for the program. I mean, nothing gets bigger than winning a national championship. Don't get me wrong. But this feels like almost a next step, that not only can you win here, but you have people committed to winning here and that are going to turn down the best job in the country. Scott Drew, just over an hour ago, put out his own statement. He said, "In our program, we strive to put Jesus first, then others, then ourselves. Culture of joy. We truly believe God has called my family and I to continue our work here at Baylor, surrounded by the best people and community anyone could be blessed to have. We are grateful for the support of Mac Rhodes, President Linda Livingstone, and the entire Baylor family, and we look forward to working together to bring more championships to Waco. #joy. And joy it was. No acronym needed. This was pure joy. And I think if you're a Baylor fan, it's like, here we go. Scott Drew's going to be on fire. Like, now let's get back to winning championships. And it hasn't been where we wanted it to be the last couple of years, but you have a Hall of Fame coach. He has just turned down Kentucky. Let's make some deep runs again. And let's get this thing to some more Sweet 16s, Elite 8s, and hopefully some Final Fours down the line. But, I mean, I think Scott Drew shocked the nation today by deciding to stay with Baylor. And honestly, for Kentucky, it's got to be embarrassing. I know there are fans in the comments right now. They've been in them all week saying they didn't actually want Scott Drew. He's overrated, that he wasn't going to be a fit there. And fine, that's great. You don't have him. But who is next? Is it? I don't think Dan Hurley's walking through that door. Maybe it is Rick Pitino. Maybe it is Bruce Pearl. I think that would be a good hire. Or maybe you just wait this out for less than a week. I think it is now. I think it's 6 days until the play-in games, and just wait it out for Billy Donovan. I think that's a dynamite hire, personally. Not just, hey, I don't need to say it to get you off of Scott Drew's scent anymore. I really believe that. I think that's a good hire. But boy, this is an egg on the face moment for Kentucky, the likes of which we haven't seen in a long time. This is separate from, a classic March Madness upset of which they've fallen victim to 2 of the last 3 years, but it's more than that. This is not a team beat you on a good day for them. This is mighty Kentucky losing out on a power struggle, which is insane. And I know people would say, if I told you in 2003 the Baylor basketball coach would turn down Kentucky to stay at Baylor, you'd have thought I was crazy. And I would. But if you had said that in like 2019, I would have thought you were crazy. But here we are. And I'm not saying Baylor is by any means on the same plane as Kentucky in terms of an overall basketball program. They're not. But the gap between those two programs has closed a lot in the last 10 years and in the last 5 years. And it is now to the point where Scott Drew has built something that's good enough to turn down Kentucky for. That doesn't necessarily mean it's as good a program, but it's good enough that it's now potentially a top 10, top 15 job in all of college basketball. Like with the facilities they have, with the players they have coming in, with the talent here in Texas, with the resources that the university is pouring into it. I know Baylor likes to play poor, and a lot of people think that they are very poor. And compared to Kentucky, they are, but they are pooling resources to basketball. There isn't a school in this country that is Baylor size that has Power 5 football and puts this much attention into basketball. There's not one. Not one. And there are some schools that are small and private. I mean, Duke is a little bit bigger in terms of resources than Baylor is, so I don't count them on that. But of course, there's Villanova and there's Georgetown, but those guys don't have major football. Baylor does, and put their resources into basketball. I just would love to be a fly on the wall in that Drew household last night. Obviously, again, the family went out to scout Lexington and came back, and it was clearly family meeting time, pray on it time. And this morning, Scott announces that he wants to stay in Waco. And I'm sure a lot of that was a lifestyle choice. A lot of it. Can't say it enough. He's got kids that have grown up here. One of them goes to Baylor. They've been building a new house here for 2 years. I think they like the fact that they won't have for sale signs on their lawn when they lose a game, and no death threats in their mailbox. I don't condone any of that, but I do understand why Kentucky has one of the most passionate fan bases in the country. Baylor has great fans too, but it's not going to be on that level. It's not going to be Vipers. It's not going to be one subpar season and we want you out the door. I think a lot of that plays into this decision because I know there's, everybody is different, but when it comes down to brass tacks, you had a Hall of Famer leave Kentucky after 15 years, and you had 2 top-end college basketball coaches say no to Kentucky. And this is a bad time to be losing my voice here on a live video, but that's what it comes down to, is other guys turn down Kentucky. So maybe that's a thing amongst college basketball coaches, at least these ones, that they don't want to feel the heat of the Big Blue Nation. And you take with that what you will. But Scott Drew is staying. And I think what that means is he will not coach another basketball team. We had that idea and belief before this Kentucky search, but to turn down Kentucky is to turn down everybody. Like that means, he might coach his future grandson's town league basketball, church league basketball, but he's not coaching another team. He is retiring a Baylor Bear. And to be honest, I think we need to start working on the statue right now. I think we need to bronze that booth in Mikasita in Hewitt, hang that picture everywhere, even though it was a bit of a deceptive move, I think, by Scott. And we need to start building the statue right now and put his name on the court. Whatever rules Mac had in place or the athletic department had in place to not put Kim Mulkey's name on the court or build her a statue, I think those can be thrown out. Like we need to immortalize Scott Drew with what he has now done for us, not only on the court, but in the community and specifically today. I think this is one of the biggest wins in Baylor history. He does need to hit the portal hard. We have heard, even in the hours since he announced he was coming back, that they've reached out to a couple of guys in the portal. They've got probably their best recruiting class ever coming in. And I cannot wait for the picture next year of Scott Drew with his arm around VJ Edgecombe during a game. The two guys that turned down Kentucky for Baylor. Yes. Get in, man. Like that is unfathomable even a couple of years ago. And for some of us, it was unfathomable a couple hours ago. Like if you took yourself out of we're in the mud as Baylor fans and Kentucky fans who are watching too. We've been in the mud. We've been in this coaching search every hour on the hour. And we like to think we know Scott Drew very well as Baylor fans. But if you're an outsider, everything the last couple of days has kind of pointed to him going to Kentucky, right? He became the primary target. He was silent for a while, and then you get the Mika Sita tweet, and it's like, oh, maybe it's Baylor. That's certainly the way I was thinking. And then, again, you have the family on a private plane from a Kentucky booster to go see Lexington. Everyone else outside of this search, and most people who are within the mud with us, were saying, that's it. He's done. He's going to Kentucky. Who would turn down Kentucky? Of course he's going. And now he's getting these free trips to go out and see it. His family is. And yet at the end of the day, he stays with Baylor. And there's a lot that goes into that. Obviously, the family aspect is big. The faith aspect is a big part of it. I think it was a little overblown because I think the people of Kentucky wouldn't have minded the culture of joy. Most of them, especially if you're winning. That's the Bible Belt too, down there in Kentucky. So I don't think they would have had a major problem with that. It's not like he's going up to Stanford or Villanova. So I don't think that would have been an issue, but I think he really feels a calling to Baylor with the school with a greater message, with a program with a greater message than just the basketball or just the education, because they're pretty excellent at both, but something that goes beyond that and being a servant leader. And that would always point towards Baylor's direction over Kentucky, always, over any state school. So I think that played into it too. But again, I mean, you can't state enough that the gap has been closed between these two programs. Kentucky's still at the top. Don't get me wrong. And they probably hate that I'm even saying that, but it is a lot closer than it was a couple of years ago. And I will have to say, credit to the administration at Baylor, because I was on with Locked On Big 12 with Drake Toll yesterday, and I meant everything I said, but it was a break glass scenario. If Scott Drew had left Baylor for Kentucky, then you're talking about, two Hall of Fame coaches leaving in a 4-year span. That would have fallen directly on Mac Rhoades and the athletic department and Linda Livingstone and the administration. Even though those are separate cases and all have separate reasons for why those people went, like that's the proof was in the pudding. It wouldn't have mattered what the pattern was, just that those two people had left. And Matt Rule, you can add into that too. 3 Dynamite coaches had left for other jobs, not retiring. And I think one of the reasons that Scott is staying is because Mac and Linda and the administration gave him a reason to stay, and they didn't do it at the 11th hour. What I mean by that is I was concerned through this week that there wasn't going to be anything else that Baylor could do. They've given it all to him. He's one of the best paid coaches in America. He's in a place that adores him. He can get almost any recruit he wants now. And he's got excellent facilities, a real commitment to basketball, and the shiny new toy on the Brazos, the Foster Pavilion, which gives him one of the best home court advantages in all of college basketball. That place is rocking. And so Mac and Linda and Baylor and the Foster family and all these people, the Fudge family, all these people who have contributed, they gave him a reason to stay long before it was decision time. They didn't swoop in with an extension at the last minute. They didn't, try to double his salary at the 11th hour. All he wanted was already there. So you have to give them credit for that. And this administration and athletic department takes a lot of crap. And I think a lot of it's unfounded, to be quite honest with you. And we know the struggles that have happened on the field the last couple of years for basically everything besides men's basketball. And they gave him a reason to stay before it was ever a decision whether to stay or leave. And you can't credit them enough for that. But yeah, we were almost in the worst possible scenario. Like I had mentioned on the show, if Scott Drew had left, your athletic department's in the wilderness, and you're turning the clock back 20 years, really, to what Baylor was in the mid to early aughts. But thankfully, you kept the face of your athletic department, and we're ready to compete for championships again. And I know this is probably a tough time for Scott Drew. It's been an angsty week for him and for his family. And I'm sure there's a lot of melancholy involved with turning down this job. Maybe not regret or overall sadness, but a little bit like I try to put it this way. I think Scott Drew is thinking a lot about like 12-year-old Scott Drew this week and what that kid would have done who dreamed of being a college basketball coach. And what that kid would have done had he got offered the Kentucky job. You dream about jobs like that. Kentucky, Indiana, Duke, Kansas, Carolina. You dream about those jobs. And I'm sure he dreamt about it as a kid. And I'm sure he dreamt about it as a 25-year-old and a 35-year-old, maybe a 40-year-old. And so it feels like a dream has almost died on the vine in that respect. But on the flip side, I think he knows he already has his dream job. That everything's in place here for him to compete at the highest level and coach something beyond basketball. And he has that at Baylor. And he is a legend here. He'll never have to buy a Dr. Pepper here. His family is well taken care of. He can really do no wrong in this place. And this is a win for him, and it's a humongous win for Baylor and the Baylor family. Because it was almost doomsday scenario. And I was thinking a lot about it this last week. This is another thing I talked about with Locked On Big 12 with Drake, was I came into Baylor as a student in 2015, and it was arguably the hottest school in the country. The athletic department was on fire. They were, Chip and Joe were national celebrities, international celebrities, still are. They were expanding the campus. They were getting more kids from out of state. That number, we're about 50-50 Texas and out of state kids at Baylor now. And I never thought I'd be saying that. And a ton of that was due to the success of the athletic department. Art Briles and the football team, Heisman Trophy, new stadium, back-to-back Big 12 championships. Obviously, Kim Mulkey's women's basketball dynasty, men's basketball very much on the rise. That had a lot to do with it. And Baylor can brand themselves through athletics better than, or more importantly, than most schools in the country. Because Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, Cal, USC, all these, they don't need sports as branding. It really helps, but they're major elite state schools. Baylor gets a national footprint because of athletics to spread their message through athletic success. And Linda Livingstone has leaned into that big time in her tenure as the Baylor president. And so I say that all to say that I was thinking about 2015 and thinking, if I had told you then that by the time you leave a decade later, it would all have fallen apart, I would have thought you were crazy. This is a sleeping giant. It's just starting to wake up. And some of it has fallen down on hard times. Don't get me wrong. But as long as we have Scott Drew and this men's basketball program, we are still spreading our message through athletics, through athletic greatness, as a matter of fact, through, going to the Final Four, winning Big 12 championships, having lottery picks in the draft every year. all of those things count for a university. And this is just such a monumentous day for Baylor. And yeah, a little bit of egg on the face for Kentucky. I've got 200 of you watching live right now, and I am so thankful for that. I'm almost going to get emotional. This has been an awesome week. It's been an exhausting week, but the fan response on the channel has just been incredible, and I'm so happy to get you all involved. That's why I do this. I love having you guys involved. So I'm going to go to the comments just for a few minutes here, and there's too much for me to do, but we'll go through it anyway. Cowboys don't complain is kind of backwardsly complaining right now. No one actually wanted this guy besides Mitch. Let's be honest. Okay. I have loved this from the Kentucky fans all week. Again, I'm really appreciative of you guys watching and getting involved in the videos. I've seen a lot of this. Kentucky fans didn't want Scott Drew. They felt they were above Scott Drew. Two things on that. First thing, you're great as a program. You're great. You're not above Scott Drew. Okay. There's, again, 5 or 6 coaches active in college basketball who have a national championship ring, and Scott Drew is one of them. So, in fact, he's got just as many as Calipari does. So I don't understand this feeling of being above him. And the second thing is these fans are saying things like this, like what Cowboys Don't Complain says. No one, the fans didn't want him, but Mitch wanted him. So don't say that we wanted him. Well, Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director at the University of Kentucky, last I checked, makes the hire. So I don't think that really matters. So that's all. I think he's really the only one that needs to make that decision. Ivan Salazar says, I wonder why the AD from Kentucky has not sought the coach of the Purdue Boilermakers. I think it's funny that you spelled Purdue like that, since your last coach, or Kentucky's last coach, got lured away by the Tyson chicken nugget fortune. Purdue, spelled like this, is like the chicken company. But the Purdue Boilermakers, that's I guess an interesting question. I don't think people rate Matt Painter as one of these all-time great coaches, and he's been at Purdue so long. I think Scott Drew's a better coach. So I think that's probably why. Anyway, yeah, a lot of people in the comments just talking about the family decision of this, and that plays a big part of it. Not just Scott Drew's immediate family, but also the family that he has here, the family that this all is. This is more than just a basketball team or just some fans out there. This is more important than that. And Jack brings up the point I said earlier. No coach wants Kentucky for one reason only: the fans. I don't know if no coach wants them, but right now they're still looking for a coach. I think there are coaches out there that would still love the pressure of that job. And I can't say enough good things about the general Kentucky fan base, in that it is a pressure job because they're everywhere. They're everywhere. You could have a Kentucky basketball watch party at any major city in the United States and some international and get a massive crowd there. They're at every airport you go into. They are inescapable. And there's good and there's bad to that. And I think Scott Drew just probably did not want to deal with that. And I don't think that was the only thing that went into it, but I think that's part of it. Chris Wood said, Alvin Brooks III is a huge underrated asset, the primary recruiter for top talent, and is also a big-time family man. I hope Baylor retains him. I believe they will retain him. And if they don't, it's because a program will come calling for him to be the head coach. And he might be the next in that line of the Scott Drew coaching tree, which is the best of any active coach in college basketball. AB, great guy, terrific recruiter, has had a huge part of this. A huge part of this rise that Baylor has had to a powerhouse, new blood, whatever you want to call it. Kentucky Boy 22, I wonder who he roots for, says, I don't think Drew was cut out for the Kentucky job. Kentucky isn't for everyone. Thank God it's not. KB, thank God it is not. There's some truth to this. I think you're coming at it from a pretty arrogant angle, because I've seen a lot of Kentucky fans saying that, he's not fit for the job. And I put this in today's episode, actually. So I would go check that out on the YouTube channel, that he's not the right fit. And I think a lot of Kentucky fans think the fit is Calipari and Pitino, which makes sense because those guys are hugely successful, the most successful Kentucky coaches since Adolph Rupp. And so does that mean they need to have a huge ego? Does that mean they need to be really slimy? Does that mean they need to vacate Final Fours? Because in that case, yes, those guys fit it. Scott Drew does not. And I suggested Sean Miller. He's not been to a Final Four yet, but if he did, it would almost certainly be vacated. So I think that would be a good way to go. Anyway, spread the good news. Scott Drew staying at Baylor, ready to continue this powerhouse run that Baylor is on. Just need to get past the round of 32. That would help. That would help. So in a lot of ways, Kentucky, you and I are going through the same problems. We just want to get past the first weekend. So, spit on us all you want, but we're kind of going through the same thing, and we have the coach that you wanted. No matter what Kentucky boy or whatever, the handful of Kentucky fans on Twitter and in the comments say, that is a coach you wanted. He's staying with us at Baylor, and I can't be happier for it. We're going to have more on this coverage. Of course, it'll be in tomorrow's episode as well. We'll try to hear from Scott Drew. I'm sure that probably won't happen until next week, but we'll kind of go in depth on what went into this decision, what this means for Baylor going forward, and in the short term, really next year. I think that will be a big thing to look at. This is a big year with the recruiting class he has coming in, and with Scott Drew actually staying, and we'll hit the portal and see who needs to be there. But we will talk about, kind of close the book on it, hopefully, the Scott Drew Kentucky saga tomorrow, and kind of look forward with Baylor's football spring game next weekend, as well as the transfer portal prospects. Thank y'all so much for joining along. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. We are here on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe. Get involved down in the comment section. Tell your friends about it. We are your first listen today and every day. We're the only place that is giving you Baylor sports news, nothing but Baylor sports news every day that's not coming directly from the university. And we're really proud of that. We're also available wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Locked On Baylor. You can see mine on there at Real Cam Stewart. More than happy to continue this Scott Drew coverage of him staying in Waco. We'll be back tomorrow with your favorite show, which is, of course, Locked On